Hi, Dr. Phil Phlox here, also known as John Billingsley. I volunteer for the Hollywood Food Coalition. We serve terrific meals to the unhoused 7 nights a week. We assist 100 nonprofits with their food needs. We work with community partners to address food insecurity in Southern California. If you're in LA, come and volunteer with us at hofoco.org/volunteer, and any Federation credits you can spare go a long way.
The Trek Geeks Podcast Network is proud to have Fansets as its presenting sponsor. Fansets is the place for amazing pin collectibles with over 300 officially licensed Star Trek pins and new releases every month.
Stay tuned for a special discount code good on your next order at fansets.com just for Discovering Trek listeners. Fansets, our pins have character.
Is Mariner a Section 31 operative? Will Tendi finish all the crew physicals? And speaking of physical, Mugatos are horny little bastards, aren't they? No pun intended. Jump in the turbo lift and hit the down button, folks. My name is Dan Davidson, and we are Discovering Trek Lower Decks. Thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Discovering Trek, the Star Trek Universe Companion, presented by Fansets. Episode 4 seemed like a kink fest, both on the planet and on the ship. And who would have thought that Ta'ana had the hots for shacks? Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, and right now I need to introduce the best team in the quadrant to talk all things Lower Decks. We're our own version of the Lower Decks crew, and I, for one, can't wait to see Sara all greened up to play Tendi at a future convention. Welcome back, Kasey, Bill, and Sara. Get that makeup ready, girl.
Look out, future bathtubs. You're going to be green.
See, now here I thought Kasey was going to be Tendi. I'm relieved.
Not with that hair.
Really?
Wow. I don't think you're in a position to give him crap about his hair.
I don't have any. Whatever,
I
Curly.
know.
Curly. Hey, it's good to see you guys. Episode 4 now. Mugato, Gumato. I just love every single week we're getting some kind of callback to some kind of show. This one had several again, and it's always great to talk about all the cool things that are happening in Lower Decks, and we're going to do it in episode 4 in just a minute. It's great to be here with the three of you as always, but we want to hear from our listeners as to what they thought of episode 4. So, Bill, how can they do that?
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Sure thing, Dan. I just read the copy. So listeners, we really want to hear from you. And the best way to do that is to get yourself the Trek Geeks mobile app for your iOS or Android device. Download that thing, tap the More button, get a whole bunch of ways to get in touch with us. And while you're at it, you can check out some of our brand new app-exclusive shows that you are just not going to be able to get anywhere else. Head to trekgeeks.com/app to get all the details. Plus, you can join the most positive Star Trek Facebook group there is. It's Camp Kittimer, and it's the official Facebook group of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. It is so easy to join. So easy. Just head on over to Facebook, search for Camp Kittimer, answer a couple of questions, and we'll let you right in to take part in all the fun and positive discussion. Like Dan, it's just that simple. Boom goes the dynamite. And a big thank you to our wonderful admins, Haley, Jackie, and Fark, for the great job they do running the camp. Please remember, of course, that any comments or messages you leave us in any of these places may be used in a future episode, Dan.
It may be. Absolutely. But before we start our discussion...
Black alert. Black alert.
We want to warn our listeners that this episode of Discovering Trek Lower Decks contains spoilers. So if you haven't watched Star Trek Lower Decks Episode 4, stop listening right now, go on over to Paramount Plus and check it out, and then head back over to Discovering Trek. Failure to do that puts you at risk to find out plot developments, character details, and weird sex things going on in Mugato, Gumato.
Spoiler alert.
You sounded just like Grossman. Very well done. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was very well done. So, Yeah.
Hide your kids, hide your wife. We're going to talk about
this might be a PG-13 episode.
Freaky Mugato sex.
Yeah, we are. And Sarah, what'd you think? let's just get it right. Let's just put it right out there right now.
If I see someone dressed as a Mugato at a Las Vegas convention, I'm going to have mixed feelings and hope that I'm sober when I run into them. I don't know.
With a broken. And what if it has a broken horn?
Let's call the
Could that have been from friction?
Right.
Yeah.
A little gross.
Anyway, it was a little gross, and you know what? I'm the first person to love jokes like that, but I gotta say, in all honesty, I liked the episode. That kind of, if there's ever a line to cross, I'm just not sure if that line was crossed in this episode. It was really awkward, and I was watching it alone.
No comment.
Exactly. Which hand was jealous, Dan?
I was okay with it. I thought at first it started off a bit like a National Geographic documentary, and I think it would have been great if they'd had a voiceover to that effect with sort of the and the Mugato by the log, But then to have the third Mugato who likes to watch come in, I think is what really pushed it over the line into weird.
Weird.
We've got a whole bunch of new band names for Dayton Ward, from Horny Mugato to you name it. I think this is one that's gonna. I think it's gonna divide some people, kind of like the first F-bomb in Star Trek Discovery.
Yep.
But ultimately, if I consider what Lower Decks is, it's a comedy.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I'm okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a comedy. It's on a streaming service. They don't have the same federal rules that they have to follow, maybe, I guess. And you know what? In TV nowadays, that might be something that would be on regular network television and be able to get away with. I mean, if this isn't the Brady Bunch era, right? So
I guess my question is, what was the rating of the episode? Because there may be some parents watching this with kids.
Yeah. Yep.
And were they able to stave that off? I don't know.
Let me ask you this then, Sarah. That's a good question that Bill just brought up. If you're a parent and you have the kids watching this, and the episode with the Mugato and the logs and the third one, is that something that's going to go over the kids' heads enough that it won't be a problem? Or I don't know. I don't know.
I think there's potential for it to maybe go over their heads. But as Bill was doing the joking motion that the Mugato did, that's the part that I thought was a bit... And it's funny because it's not that bad. Like I find this kind of stuff hilarious, but it's just that if he'd been like, if the third one showed up and pulled out a camcorder, I would have found that funnier because it's not as visceral. That's the difference.
Absolutely right.
That to me, they're still both like doing their own thing but there's just something so much more like real about what the direction they took, and I was like, I don't need to see this. I'm intruding.
I think in all of the Star Trek, all of the modern Trek, and let's call it Kurtzman Trek, and I'm not saying that in negative at all, because Trek has been awesome. This was the first, I think, real what the bleep jaw drop moment when that third one started doing what he did. That was just really something, Kasey. I think it's the thing that everybody's going to be talking about this week, is that particular scene. And there's so much more in this episode going on that was great, but everybody's going to talk about it first, just like we are.
Well, when the Tapatios are mating, it's just something that... having raised two boys and, knowing where they could find whatever content they wanted to forever, and like going, oh, okay. This is very Rick and Morty vein to me, and I'm like, this is not a child's animated show. Mm-hmm. This is an adult animated show, and there's gonna be more adult jokes. Not every one of those jokes will land for each person, but it's like, hey, how can we make the audience and the characters uncomfortable at the same time? And it succeeded. And I was laughing. When the third one came in, I was like, he likes to watch. Okay.
And I feel like I feel like I need to definitely like reiterate. I loved this episode. I enjoyed that scene. I thought it was hilarious. But, in Lower Decks, we still love you, amazingly so. But there are people who are going to ask these questions, I think. Right. And that's the way it is.
I just can't help but laugh because when Dan's like, this is the most like jaw-dropping, it just made me think of other moments like the Data and Yar and Naked Now. And I'm like, now who would have sat and watched that?
Or what about Voke and Laurel?
Right?
in Star Trek Discovery.
Which we saw a lot of.
I thought for me that was far more jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
I think jaw-dropping in terms for me as that's not something, well, I guess all of them could be, that's not something I expected to see in Star Trek.
And then maybe that's the purpose of it. To give the audience what they're not expecting. Otherwise, we just get retreads of all the stuff we've seen already.
Yep.
And a little controversy and discussion, and you keep that alive.
Keep it going. Yep, which is exactly what we're doing here. Now, that doesn't, there's still a lot more to talk about in this episode because this episode had a lot going on and it was good. And again, I don't want to say that I didn't like the episode. I did. That was just something I didn't expect, and it kind of surprised me. And I will say this: I'm going to have to record my wife's reaction when we watch this when it's on Paramount Plus because we haven't watched it yet. She hasn't been able to watch it. So when we sit down to watch it together, it'll be interesting to see what her reaction is. But like I said, a lot of stuff going on in this episode. And let's start breaking stuff down a little bit. Bill, we get to see Ferengi.
Which is awesome. Denobulans.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Which was awesome.
Which just very quickly, right in that teaser, but it was great to see with their puff up face. I thought that was a great Phlox moment. But this episode has a lot of good things happening in it, and has the callbacks that we always talk about too.
It really is, and this story is so Star Trek. I mean, here the Ferengi are poaching Mugato to steal their horns. If that doesn't just rip right out of current day, the plight of the rhinoceros and other animals, other wild animals, then I don't know what does. So here we are, we're taking a topic that Star Trek could, should, and does address, and doing it in a really great way. And, the other thing I appreciate is like the Pakleds, Lower Decks has made the Ferengi a serious threat again, and in a believable way, and I am here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great point about the Ferengi, Bill, because Kasey, I think you also were interested in and had comments about what the Ferengi were like in this episode. We've seen them a few times in Lower Decks, and each time they're pretty awesome. And if I remember correctly, somebody uses a reference about how these aren't the last outpost Ferengi, which I thought was pretty great call reference to when they were dumb on TNG.
Yeah. Well, finally, the Ferengi that were supposed to be the villains, the hardcore villains for TNG, and then became a laughingstock in certain things, and then DS9 propped them up to be deep, wonderful characters, and then finally here we get them as serious villains that are doing some nasty stuff, and it's like these aren't cute Ferengi in any way, where they're slightly misunderstood or this. It's like, no, they're literally killing other creatures for their profit. And I was glad to see that what this show is doing is reworking known characters and species to give them something. You need the drama.
Yeah.
And if everybody's soft and comfortable, that doesn't work at all. And glad they're here. And as we've seen in Lower Decks, there are other Ferengi that aren't like this. So it once again makes them three-dimensional characters.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. And I think the first episode of Lower Decks in season 1, when Boimler wants to leave Starfleet, Mariner sets up something with a Ferengi who looks like one of these mean, vicious ones, but is actually more of a Quark type character at the end when she's talking to him on the pad. So I like what they're doing. I like how they are continuing to add depth to these different races. Sara, one of the things that I found was kind of a little bit of a swing and a miss, and please tell me, guys, if you think that I'm wrong with this, was the Freeman story. It really didn't latch on to me very much about her being deceived by this guy with the shuttle and then being able to get all of her prized possessions and almost get away with it.
You know, you mentioned it, and I even for a moment ago, I was like, "Oh, what were you talking about?" Like, I don't remember that. That's how it sat. This whole episode kind of sat with me that way. I didn't like. I get what Kasey said about the Ferengi thing, and I think he makes a really, really good point. I didn't love the storyline. Just because I've been doing a rewatch of DS9, and I just love what they've done so much with the Ferengi that I'm watching this, and I'm like, no, that's what they're really mean. This is a horrible band of Ferengi. It's bumming me out. So. There's a lot of things about this, and I didn't love the whole Section 31. It's still a good episode, but not my favorite. I just found that it was a lot of out of left field stuff.
I don't know about for all you, but I'm finding like this series is much more social than the other series have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's other social things that they're tackling, but also, the lower deckers, they have no quarters. So they
live in a hallway.
They meet somewhere else. They're doing their jobs, but then also eating together all the time. I mean, that's one of the things I love about this show is everybody's eating all the time or drinking. And so with all this and bringing up, it was odd. I was like, oh, this is an insurance scam in space? Okay. An interesting, or could have been way more interesting third story, but there's just these social things that I think a lot of us can relate to in an everyday fashion that, this, not just this story, but the entire series itself. I mean, I just think about the Elgatos and it's like, are we going to, is this something like, I'm trying not to say the specific name, but a park that has a bunch of animals that, swim around and perform for you. And then I thought about the end of this episode where like, okay, they're not killing these creatures anymore, but is it really a preserve for them? Or are they now the attractions at an amusement park?
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a really great point.
That's a very good point. It makes you really kind of sit down and not smile because you got to think about the seriousness of it. But
wow, thanks for bringing us all down, Kasey.
Yeah.
Well, just stick your finger in some poop, taste it, and go, fresh, tangy.
I forgot about that. Oh my god.
How have we made it this far into the show without talking about Shax's tasting poop?
I know.
Some of us haven't had dinner yet.
And also,
enjoy the pudding.
How have we made it this far into the show and not talked about Anbujitsu? I love this callback. Rutherford and Boimler get to demonstrate they're not bad. I mean, you're putting in the work. They can be fierce, but Mara gets to prove time and again why she's still a total badass.
Yeah, she really is.
It's such a great, great scene.
Yeah, do you all feel in this that it's a very sibling relationship between those three? I think Mariner and Tendi is more like deep friendship, but those three whacking the crud out of each other. I'm like, those are siblings. This is where you can beat the living, out of a brother or a sister. But as soon as there's an outside force that comes in, you F around, you're going to find out. Yep. And then as soon as the outside force goes away, you turn right back to your brother or your sister. You go, guess what? It's back on.
Okay, so we're going to take a break right now and talk about fan sets. But when we come back, I have an extremely important question for you guys.
Folks, we want to take a moment, as we do each and every week, to thank Fansets for being our exclusive sponsor here on Discovering Trek Lower Decks.
Folks, now that Vegas has been over for a couple of weeks, Lou and John and the entire Fansets team are hard at work on the newest releases to add to your ever-growing collection.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of pins that they have on the way, guys, really. The next few months is going to be like Christmas every couple of weeks with their new pin releases. And if anyone was watching on Twitter recently, there was a sneak peek at the long-awaited Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan Delta. I know it's coming soon, and I know it's going to sell out really quick, so keep your eyes on their social media pages and keep your ears right here on Discovering Trek for the release announcement. And make sure you do it real quick. Do that pre-order because Casey's going to sound like he's going to order like 50 of them.
Yeah, baby.
Well, if you do order them, and you should, you get to save money each and every week just for being a Discovering Trek listener. Just head on over to fansets.com, place a whole bunch of those pins and some more pins and even more pins into your cart. And at checkout, enter the special discount code Lower Decks. That's LOWERDECKS in all capital letters with no spaces. And that's going to get you 10% off your entire order. And don't forget, if you spend more than $30, you're going to get free shipping in the United States. That's huge.
Fansets. Our pins have character. And we thank our friends at Fansets for being the exclusive sponsor of Discovering Trek.
Okay, so just continuing our discussion about episode 4, I actually have 2 important questions. I just thought of a second one. I'm going to go with the not as important one first. And I'm going to let's see. Bill, you're from New England, so I'm going to put it your way. Do you think the bartender's from northern Maine?
Oh my God. I thought that either he was a Mainer or he was trying to channel Robert Shaw from Jaws.
Was he a bartender since the 1800s?
I'm listening to it and I'm going, what? Why do they have some guy from South Portland as the bartender on the Cerritos? I just don't get
sounded
this.
more like he was from Fort Kent. it was way up there. I thought it was funny. Yeah. So that was the non-important question. The very important question, Sarah, I'm going to direct it to you to answer first, and then I want to hear from Kasey and then Bill. Physicals are an important part of being in Starfleet. We've seen people avoiding physicals all the time, from Kirk and TOS all the way up to now in Lower Decks. Why is it so hard? Because literally all Tendi does is point a scanner at the person for 2 seconds and their physical's done. What am I missing?
I don't think you're missing anything. I think this is the reality of how people are. I mean, everyone can feel fine, but they get one diagnosis and they're out of their job. So nobody wants to risk it.
And Ta'ana was ready to shoot Tendi out the airlock, Kasey, because she didn't want to get her physical. And then the next thing you know, she's hitting on Shax. What's up with that?
Well, yeah, I think the not wanting to do physical thing storyline has run its course a long time ago, especially now that you're just getting scanned. I mean, these people aren't going in and having a surprise proctology exam or anything like that. It's Bill usually does that. So, but really, I mean, I just go, this is basically just giving Tendi an opportunity to show that she could step it up and bust her arm wide open, which was, I was like, oh, okay. And gain some respect from her superior officer. But I fully don't understand that trope being brought back anymore.
Maybe that's why they brought it back.
We all know doctors make the worst patients, right?
Right.
And I think that's the stereotype they're trying to channel in here. And I got to say, way to go, Shax. He's back from the dead. He's now got a girlfriend. Things are looking up for this guy. I mean,
I like it.
He's kicking ass, taking names, and now he's got a steady squeeze. I love it.
That was brought up in season 1.
Yeah. Right?
I don't remember
The doctor made a comment about being attracted to Shax because I was jealous and I didn't like her after that. So.
Okay.
and then in all of this, y'all, we see Jet. Jet hasn't gotten anything that he needs to from the doctor, but in there we see Kayshawn. We see Kayshawn a couple of times in this episode. No dialogue, nothing from that character, and no explanation of what's going on. So I was like, hey, I'd like to know what's happening here, because Shax is going to be shacking up. He's going to be busy sometimes.
Well, in fairness, in TNG season 1, we see Worf plenty of times, and he's not doing much.
Yeah.
And eventually he takes over the security job for Tasha. So I'm not really all that concerned that we haven't seen much of Kayshawn. We may not see much of him at all from here on in. Who knows?
I am going to estimate that. I'm going back a couple episodes, but you brought up Kayshawn, so I'm going to estimate within 3 months there will be a Kayshawn plush doll based on what happened in episode 2.
I hope it's going to be a lot sooner than that. You got to think about that. You got your own little baby Yoda. Don't screw that up.
if there's a Tom Paris plate hitting the market, there's got to be a Kayshawn.
Yep, absolutely. Right. And who would have thought that a boring game about agreements and contracts would end up being what saves the El Diablos on the planet and it becomes a zoo? I think it's just fantastic that we get a little zoo of them out there.
See, it's funny when Kasey does it.
Oh, here we go.
You're just trying too hard.
I didn't.
Because he works in an El Gato reference and it's smooth like butter. Kind of like that Kenny Loggins look of his. You do it and it's like thonk.
Well, I think the difference here is my genitals are also sensitive to phaser fire. So when I'm thinking of the tomatoes on the planet, we just got to roll with it.
Wow.
Bill?
Sara's just shaking her head.
I have no words. Rein it in, Davidson.
All right. Well, Mugatos running around, physicals to be performed, rumors flying everywhere. Sounds like a normal day at the Trek Geeks Podcast Network headquarters, Kasey. So what do we have coming up next week on Lower Decks?
Well, Dan, next week, Mariner and Boimler try to crash the party, and the Cerritos plays host to an alien that takes up more room than they had planned. It's episode 5 of Lower Decks, an embarrassment of duplers. And we will be right here waiting to talk to all of you about that. But until then, remember, you can subscribe to Discovering Trek by searching for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or by downloading the Trek Geeks Podcast Network app.
Don't forget, you can support Discovering Trek and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network by subscribing to bonus content on Patreon. Get access to the unedited audio, of all our podcasts. Don't do it, but do it. It's so good. And a lot of other perks.
Do it, definitely. And of course, we want to take a moment to recognize our amazing producers of Discovering Trek, and we are so grateful for their support. Mike Bovia, Chaz Bradshaw, Kyle Castillo, Peter Craig, Andy Davenport, Craig Ewing, Jackie and Chris Hackney, Kimberly Hartman, David Hood, Julianne Jordan, Leonel Marchand, Matt McGonigal, Jim McMahon, Darren Metcalf, Charlie Mulvey, Sean O'Halloran, Jamie Rogers, Casey Shafsky? I don't know. It sounds familiar. Wow. Jim Stoffel, Chris Trabuzio, Ken Tripp, Christina Werther, and the lovely and talented Jess Vashon.
If you would like to support Discovering Trek and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network, beam on over to patreon.com/trekgeeks, where subscription levels start at $2 a month.
For even more great Star Trek discussion, we have about 175 shows that are available on Trek Geeks Network. Actually, there's about 12 of them, including this one. There's like Trek Geeks, there's Rewind, which Sarah's the co-host of. There's Polititrek's 5-Year Mission, Deep Space Pride, Infinite Trek, The Divine Treasury, Sci-Fi Sisters, and of course, we welcome Drawn to Trek, Science Station 2, and with the first link to our network family as the latest additions to the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. You can find all our podcasts, including where to listen, by visiting trekgeeks.com/listen. The Trek Geeks Podcast Network, no one talks Trek like we do.
And don't forget, download the Trek Geeks Podcast Network app while you're at it, right? What I say?
That was in a different part of the
I know,
podcast. But
it's that important. You got to say it twice. Anyway.
That'd be the third time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, math is not hard, right?
Not hard.
Amy?
Not hard.
Not hard at all. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us for our discussion on Lower Decks Episode 4, Mugato Gumato, an episode that certainly pushed the envelope and gave us some great new moments with our favorite Lower Decks crew. Well, maybe my second favorite Lower Decks crew, because I can't thank my crew enough for another great discussion. Bill, Sara, and Kasey, can't wait to sit down with you next week to talk all about Star Trek Lower Decks Episode 5, An Embarrassment of Duplers. I don't even know what a dupler is. So until next week, never stop discovering.
Music for Discovering Trek is provided by 5-Year Mission. They're writing an original song for each episode of Star Trek. Hear more of their music at 5yearmission.net. Discovering Trek is a production of Coconut Media Works. Executive producers Bill Smith and Dan Davidson. For more great Star Trek discussion, discover the other shows of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network at trekgeeks.com or find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
coconut.